Henrik Ibsen was a Norwegian playwright in the 19th century who became well known throughout the world for his significant influence on decades of authors and playwrights after him. He is considered as the father of realism and the founder of modernism in theatrical works. The concept of realistic in art has existed since classical times across various aesthetic styles. However, realist art, such as Impressionism, approached reality with rigorous aesthetic discipline rather than aiming for a mere replica. Henrik Ibsen did not aim to faithfully depict everyday reality, but to invent a metaphorical space where the archetypical drama could unfold through realistic aesthetics. Ibsen's approach parallels modernist strategies, where art creates freedoms and possibilities not granted in everyday life. If you look at his play A Doll's House, there are certain implausible, deliberate aesthetic choices that are made to bring on stage those forces and possibilities that reality suppresses. This artistic perspective challenges conventional portrayals of reality, much like how Impressionist painters selectively portrayed modern scenes to meet their aesthetic needs rather than simply creating everyday reality. Characters in his plays are not real people with independent lives. They're crafted to serve the play's aesthetic structure. If we try to add every detail of their real lives, like their ancestors, their subconscious thoughts, or their physical conditions, the play would collapse under its own weight. Art always involves selectivity. That is what separates it from reality. George Bernard Shaw, in an 1890 Fabian literature on Ibsen, claimed that the Norwegian was the leader of a vanguard of modern Victorians who at the fin de siècle championed socialism, feminism, and new forms of artistic expression. His plays were often considered very controversial when they were published in the morally stringent 19th century. He talked about things like venereal diseases or incest, and even women leaving their husbands behind to follow their individuality. His plays were considered as problem plays, which was a form of drama that emerged during the mid-19th century. A problem play is a type of drama that has a contemporary social problem at its center, and the play usually offers a solution to the issue that opposes the dominant social opinion. A subtype of problem play is called a discussion play. Discussion play does not necessarily incorporate the social issue in the plot, but it explores the issue through characters' debates, as characters argue and put forth distinct points of views on the problem that the play arises. The problem play was also a facet of the 19th century realism movement in arts, and this genre peaked with the plays of Henrik Ibsen. Ibsen's plays raised controversial and uncomfortable social and moral issues, which created an uproar throughout Europe, often leading to screening censorship. For instance, Ibsen had to wait for a year to get his play Ghost staged. And for A Doll's House, he was forced to write an alternate ending for the German premiere, as the original ending was considered too radical and scandalous. But what made his plays so scandalous? Well, Ibsen was inspired by Darwin. Charles Darwin revised the 19th century perception of the Earth's development by questioning God as the creator, reducing humanity's role, and extending history by millions of years. Darwin's evolutionary plot hinged on reproduction with variation and numerous battles to ensure the survival of the fittest. This ponderous version of history seriously challenged the established, shorter version that centered on God and mankind and involved various miraculous interventions. Darwin's narrative drama, published as On the Origin of Species in 1859, upset the reading public. His theory of human development from ape to man fulfilled his conservative Cambridge colleagues' worst fears. Another seemingly natural assumption in Origin's extraordinary compilation of evidence is the superiority of the European male. With the publication of The Descent of Man in 1871, Darwin's almost commonplace assumption of the human male's superiority over the female becomes explicit. Although possessing certain virtues, she is limited by faculties, characteristic of the lower races. But it was Darwin's threat to religion that troubled his readers, not his attitudes about women and other races. Obviously, Darwin did not really succeed in displacing the traditional Christian notion of God, but he proposed a theory in which the Divine Father was no longer fundamental to our view of the development of life on Earth. Darwin's name and theory seem to have broken the dam containing the doubt about a divinely ordained patriarchal social structure which had dominated Europe for centuries. Yet, although he had to attack a Christian view of creation, Darwin did not exactly intend to lead a revolution. He says that, "In the distant future, I see open fields for far more important researches. Psychology will be based on a new foundation. Light will be thrown on the origin of man and his history. The authority was to be nature itself." This translation to authority of nature clearly did not come about just because of Charles Darwin. He merely sustained and synthesized a tradition of often timid but nonetheless powerful scientific investigation. Nevertheless, his theories provide a reference point from which we observe various 19th century debates, specifically in terms of transition from biblical to a natural design of human history. Henrik Ibsen may be the first to portray on stage a questioning of the father that characterizes much of the 19th century. Both the divine father and the privileged position of the father in the family were challenged during this period, and the assault may be related to Charles Darwin's attack on creationism. By undermining the divine father, Darwin weakened a significant premise of the patriarchal chain of being, which located women lower on the scale than men. Although he did not intend this effect, Darwin's biocentric vision, a vision of life itself as the central fact of being, reinforced women's claims for independence and social equality. A number of Ibsen's dramas portray first a weak or displaced husband or father who lives in a world threatened by change, and second, a woman who challenges the patriarchy. These two themes often intertwine with Darwin's questioning of the divine patriarch. In essence, Ibsen's representations of the father and the bourgeois family function, at least partially, as a trope for Darwin's undermining of the Christian patriarchy. His exploration of women's rights and their struggles for autonomy aligned with the growing feminist movement in the Victorian society. George Bernard Shaw acknowledged Ibsen's influence in promoting socialism, feminism, and new artistic forms. Shaw and other writers looked to Ibsen as a source of inspiration for pushing the boundaries of traditional literature and drama. Ibsen's impact on the late 19th century London's cultural landscape was immense. Even though he never visited Britain, his works were widely translated and performed, sparking debates and discussions. Ibsen became a cultural touchstone for those seeking new ideas and perspectives. Ibsen came to symbolize modernity for the Victorians. His works reflected the changing intellectual and cultural landscape, challenging the status quo and encouraging a more critical examination of social norms. This was the realist author Ibsen. If you'd like to know more about realism as a movement in itself, check out this lecture.